The power in your presentation comes from hours spent in preparation. That's the first thing I tell anybody who's interested in preaching and trying to get better at their craft. The second thing I have been telling people more recently is how much order matters. How you arrange your message matters tremendously. You can give me the same pieces of content, but if you put it in the wrong order, it will go from a great sermon to a just decent message. But again, if you do it the right order, it can wind up being incredible. And I'm telling you, you don't even have to change any of your content. It's just that order matters. Nerdwriter used to be one of my favorite YouTube channels when it would post a whole lot more often. And I never forget, I'd never seen this movie, but it's called Passengers with Chris Pratt. And he argues the Passengers movie was good, but there was something missing. They couldn't quite figure it out, but just that the movie was just bland. And he says it's because of how they ordered the movie. He argues the movie basically has 5 movements.
So you can break this plot up into 5 basic turning points. 1, Chris wakes up. 2, Chris wakes Jennifer up. 3, she finds out. 4, Chris sacrifices himself. And 5, she forgives him.
From that, he says, what if we change the main character and kind of rearranged how this movie started?
You could even cut back in that whole first section of Chris's time alone on the ship, but put it after the revelation.
The link is in the video description. It's amazing how he argues the same movie winds up being incredible if you just arrange it differently and maybe delete a few scenes. And I think the same goes for preaching the word of God. It is so important for us to spend so much time and labor into understanding the message, working it into our hearts, and praying for it to radically impact and change our congregation. But it's also so important to just have the humility to realize maybe I am not arranging this in the right order. I need to throw this on a wall and see if there's a better way to preach this. So this is one of the last things I do before officially writing it's not a manuscript. Comment below if you're interested how I actually write my sermon notes. Maybe I'll make this video. It's like a thought for thought bullet point that I do. That's the last step, but this is the step before the last step, and I put everything on Freeform. Freeform is an app on Mac, and it's on all Apple products. Sorry, I'm an Apple guy. Judge me. But essentially, you can do this at home if you just have some sticky notes. I just don't like the mess of sticky notes everywhere, and I don't have a good enough wall. I don't have a whiteboard. I would probably do something different if I had the means necessary, but for now, I'm using this iPad. This is actually how I organize all my sermons. And so I want to show you how I actually arrange my messages, and it always has the ability to take a good sermon to become a great sermon, especially if I have the humility to actually step through it and if I'm willing to put in the hours to make sure this is working. So let me walk you through. We just went through a peacemaking practice at our church. So this is actually episode 1 of our peacemaking practice. I'll link that up here. No, it's right there, huh? Right there. If you want to watch that first message. But here's how I organized it. I first take a lot of ideas and I put them on a Notion document. And then once I realize these ideas have like main headers, I put them into sticky notes. Let me just start from the beginning. This purple for me are ideas I have. I want to say sometime in the message, but I'm not sure how it fits. For this, it was because we just started an ad in our church. It was this whole idea. I spent money telling people why you shouldn't come to Passion Creek Church. And chief among them is if you're just looking to be forgiven by Jesus, but not formed by Jesus, we're not the place for you. And so I wanted to say that. I thought it really set up the whole purpose of us having practice-based sermon series, but I never found a perfect place to put it in the message. What I wound up doing is actually taking it and, what I wound up doing is putting it before the sermon. It was like during the welcome, just that kind of thing, and it wound up being great. So it was its own thing in and of itself, but when you were to watch on YouTube, you don't see that anywhere, but I thought it was a good line for our church. I always at least try to organize my messages in these 4 headers. You have the hook, you have the head, then you have the heart, and then you have the hands. The hook is how every message should begin, in my humble opinion. I believe we are in a context, especially mine in the southwest of America, where people are skeptical of truth. They're certainly skeptical of pastor's authority. And so it's really important. If I could just preach the word of God verse by verse and not set it up and not do this thing, that'd be amazing. We're just not in that moment today. People's desires are waging war, and they typically just don't trust me as a communicator, and I totally get it. So one way I can be an evangelist is to spend a lot of time on my hook. The hook is an ache that everybody has, and whether you're a believer or not. I'm doing this hook to draw in the crowd. This is so key in preaching a good message. Grabbing a tension is what grabs attention. So if you don't have a tension point, if you don't say something that bothers them or they have to learn more, just like how they won't watch that YouTube video, they won't really lean into the message. So it has to establish some sort of ache, some sort of hook. It used to be back in the day, I would share a funny story, get them to like me, and then go to the text. To me, that's just not it. To me, it's more important to introduce a problem and don't bring the solution right away. Get them bothered by it. That is key to storytelling. That's key to every story you've ever liked, and it's key to a good sermon. But this is essentially my hook, the flow that I had in my mind, and then I'll explain to you the color code. So it's no secret we're lonely. That was my opening line, and then I gave stats about our loneliness. Gen Z is the loneliest generation of all time and all history. Then I would transition to a great David Brooks quote, and then transitioning there, do you feel this crisis? I certainly do. And then this was the big line in that beginning section. Most of us have the desire to make friendships, but have never acquired the tool belt necessary to maintain friendships. And then I talk about how Jesus was a master at that and give a few quick biblical examples. For me, that was the hook. Let me explain the color code. The pink, it's the transition for the rest of this. It's to get people into what we're about to get into. So no secret we're lonely. Okay, I'm now shifting. It's me going up. I'm kind of showing where we're heading. And so boom, no secret we're lonely. I'm pointing people a certain direction. Yellow is just content. It's the good stuff. It's the meat of the message. Blue is like probably people will tweet that. It's not always perfect, of course, but it's a memorable line. And I like to give memorable lines along the way, but I always like the most memorable line about 75% through my message. Notice how this is a memorable line, but it doesn't give you the solution. It's saying we all want to make friends, but we don't know how to maintain friends. Does that give you the answer? No, it introduces to you the problem. But it's still blue because it's like what's going to be on the screen. People will write it down. I want them to remember it. And yellow, again, some more content. Going back up to the pink, now we're going to the head section. So I've established the hook. Now we're going to the head. I'm going to do my best not to re-preach this message, but I have to highlight a few of these things so you understand where I'm going. I think also from a good sermon to a great sermon is not just how you organize it, but how you transition each main thought. Those have to be thought through. How do you go from the hook and then say, okay, now let's go to the head. So is this possible for you and me? Since he is our rabbi and we are his apprentices, we think it is. To me, that was okay. Is this possible? Okay, we think it is. Let's now see how it's possible. Let's go into the text. Blue again, because I actually define our definition of peacemaking that we came up with on our own. And yellow for more content. This is still the head section. I moved it over, shifted it because it was kind of a new train of thought. First, notice the transition. We begin with our past. Now, when I'm actually writing my sermon notes, this transition is actually well more thought out. But again, this is just the gist. And I go to Genesis 12. And then, okay, let's look at Genesis 12. You're a product of your past is the one-liner there for the head, and then go to Exodus 34. So I hope you're tracking with me. These are all ideas I had in my head, stuff I've studied, and now I'm putting them in the right order. What I give myself permission to do in this stage is to move things around. So it could have been, because I say first, let's go to Genesis 12, I could have just as easily actually shifted it and go, you know what, this actually makes more sense. Although it doesn't, but I'm giving you an example. Let's do Exodus 34 first to talk about the character of God. Then we'll talk about how we mess things up. So let's start with Exodus 34. Boom. And then down here and here and here. That's what this whole section is for. You have to be willing to move things around. And that's what I did. I was doing this over and over. You see the finished product on this one. Now we're transitioning to another part of the head. I explain what a genogram is, yada, yada. We study more of Matthew 18 and Matthew 6. And then here's the big line in blue that I actually want them to really come away with. Again, we've actually done a lot of exegetical work. I know it doesn't look like that because of these quick sticky notes, but again, these are just main ideas for me. But the main thing I want them to see, I'm now actually giving them a solution. If you don't forgive your past, you will relive it and re-give it. And then I just let it sit there. Okay, that's very important for me to be able to say something like that. It has consequence to it. And then I let it sit. And now we've gone real heady. I've been nerding out for a while, explaining Hebrew idioms in Exodus 34, talking about Genesis 12 and 26, tracing the family line. But now I'm going to the heart. Now I'm going to what this means for you and me. Now I'm going to get vulnerable. Here, I think I get really vulnerable. I share something really deep about my struggle with forgiveness. But I talk about like, hey, none of these are things you'd want to relive or re-give, but you keep doing it anyway because we're skipping the practice of forgiveness. I talk about my own journey of struggling to forgive. Again, I'll link it up here if you want to watch this message. It's Peacemaking Practice, episode 1. And so this is when I slow down. This is when I get vulnerable, share something in my own life or something I've been inspired by somebody else. This is when I actually show you how much I've been wrestling with this concept. So far, I've said it's a problem, and I've shown some biblical solutions, right? Like some biblical data to help us understand what the Word of God has to say about this. And now I slow down and say, man, I know I get this with my head, but like this is how it's been hard to apply and actually like believe in my heart. Gray is when it's like a long quote. And so I thought this quote was really helpful for it. And then we go to the hands. In the hands section of a message, I transition to it. We're going to say, hey, this week we're going to start the process of forgiving. 2 key ideas as we engage in that. 1, we use mirrors, not microscopes. 2, God uses moments and marathons. Typically, I use green as the real practice-based. Here's like tangible things I'm going to leave them away with. That is a quick example of what I do in a sermon. I have the humility, hopefully. I gain the humility to say, you know what? Actually, for this sermon, I'm actually going to move this right after the head. Okay, I'm going to put this here. I'm going to take. Sometimes I've done that. Wow, when I do this, look at how it ends, right? That's the key in these note taking. You move little by little or whole sections at a time, and you walk it through, you say it in your brain, and you'll realize this went from a good message to a great one. I didn't change any of the content. I just changed the order of the content. Thank you for watching today's video. This is the video I think you should watch. This is the video YouTube says you should watch.